Article 30. Participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure and sport. This article begins with 2 comments highlighted in panels. There are regularly workshops and talks or short courses in my community that I want to attend and participate in, but there is no government funding to cover New Zealand Sign Language interpreter costs to access community events. Survey respondent. Access to public events or activities such as sports events, live theatre and movies should be accessible. Often families with a disabled family member are excluded where accessibility precludes access or participation. Survey respondent. Introduction. This article requires that disabled people have the same rights as others to participate in and enjoy the arts, sports, games, films and other similar activities. General comment. New Zealand's rich multicultural society provides opportunities for people to participate in a wide range of cultural and sporting events. Disabled people often feel excluded through lack of access and, as a result, can become disconnected from their own communities. Importance of Article 30 to disabled people in New Zealand. Article 30 reflects the strong desire by disabled people to be involved in the cultural life and activities of their communities at a local and national level. Current place of Article 30 in New Zealand law and practice. Beyond the general provisions of the Human Rights Act 1993, the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990 and the Building Code, there is no specific legislation promoting access to cultural and sporting events in New Zealand. The Copyright Marrakesh Treaty Implementation Amendment Act 2019 removed some copyright restrictions to enable more works to be produced in accessible formats. This means that those with a print disability will now have access to a broader range of literary, artistic and dramatic works. Endnote 231. There is currently no legislation that provides for mandatory captions on television and TVNZ on-demand platforms. Calls have been made to regulate the use of captions to increase access for the estimated 1 in 6 New Zealanders who use them. Endnote 232. The inquiry into captioning in New Zealand, which reported to the House of Representatives in 2017, recommended that, Endnote 233, provisioning of captioning content be a requirement for New Zealand On Air and Film Commission funding, and further progress should be made in improving captioning access, including all platforms from broadcast to TVNZ on-demand content and film screenings. There are a number of initiatives promoting accessibility in New Zealand in sporting and cultural areas. However, these are mostly driven at an organisational or individual level rather than a government level and are largely promoted through charitable funding. The government has been considering the introduction of a companion card to entitle disabled people to take a companion to cultural and sporting events free or at a reduced price. Endnote 234. No decision has been made on this to date. Committee's previous dialogue with the state on Article 30. In its list of issues, the Disability Committee asked the government to report on measures taken to enhance accessibility in sports facilities, museums, cultural and natural heritage sites, and any place for the cultural life of disabled people. In its response, the government made reference to the Accessibility Design Guide and Self-Assessment Checklist, Sport NZ 2014, Endnote 235, and an increase in funding for TV captioning per year from $2.4 million to $2.8 million. It also referenced funding for organisations that work to improve accessibility, including Arts Access Aotearoa, Touch Compass Dance Company, the Halberg Disability Sport Foundation, Special Olympics New Zealand and Paralympics New Zealand. The response conceded that there is no government policy to enhance accessibility in museums, but made reference to provision for accessibility by the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa, Endnote 236, and Heritage New Zealand, Pohere Taonga. Comment on the realisation of Article 30 in New Zealand. Progress has been made in the area of accessibility to culture, sport and leisure since the last report to the Disability Committee. However, there is still work to be done to ensure this is rolled out consistently and equitably to the diverse communities across the country. There are still many events that take place in New Zealand that are inaccessible to people with limited mobility, people who use wheelchairs, deaf and other disabled people. This includes events where disabled people might choose to attend as spectators, as well as cultural and sporting events in which disabled people might want to participate. The first year that audio description was made available to a live audience in Te Reo Māori was 2019. This initiative was achieved without government funding. Unfortunately, government-funded captioning and audio description for television is not available in any language other than English and is not available on all free-to-air channels. There is a limited amount of captioning, but no audio description, currently available on TVNZ On Demand. Neither audio description nor captioning are available on Māori television. Some progress has been made at local authority levels to increase accessibility to cultural events. For example, Auckland Council has funded New Zealand Sign Language NZSL interpreters and audio describers at the Anzac Dawn service for the past few years, and a number of other local events include some accessible provision, including NZSL interpreters, audio description, accessible parking and toilets. It is pleasing to note that closed captions are increasingly available at New Zealand cinemas. Despite the success of high-profile para-athletes, disability organisations report that disability sports are funded to a lesser degree than sporting activities for non-disabled people. Combined with the additional costs that many disabled people face in accessing sporting opportunities, including cost of travel, access to appropriate support people, and access to suitable training facilities, there are currently fewer opportunities for disabled people to participate in sports compared to their non-disabled peers. Even though Te Reo Māori and NZSL are two of New Zealand's official languages, deaf Māori are disadvantaged due to the lack of trilingual interpreters for tangata whaikaha access to events of cultural significance. At the consultation hui, participants said that access to public events and activities, such as sports events, live theatre and movies, should be accessible. At present, families with a disabled family member are often excluded as inaccessibility precludes access or participation. Recommendations. The IMM recommends that the government 103. Take steps to mandate that publicly funded sporting and cultural initiatives and facilities, including those provided in partnership with local government, are made accessible as a requirement of standard procurement procedures and existing facilities to best practice accessibility standards. 104. Ensure that all tourist facilities, hotels and other accommodation providers, public attractions and sporting and cultural facilities are required to provide detailed information on their websites outlining the accessibility features of the venue and/or service. 105. Require all sporting, cultural, entertainment and/or recreational facilities to make provision for accessibility features proportionate to the prevalence of those access needs in the community. 106. Introduce a discount scheme for disabled people's companion tickets to enable disabled people to take a support carer to events and performances at a reduced cost. 107. Provide increased funding to train and employ trilingual interpreters and audio describers and to make their services available at civic and cultural events. This will require developing a strategy to build a pool of trilingual personnel. 108. Introduce legislation to require an increase in the amount of captioning and audio description on New Zealand television, including the provision of captions and audio description for on-demand content, including content provided in Te Reo Māori. 109. Require sporting events to provide a live commentary for blind patrons, either generated from within the stadium or via standard radio stations, which must be live and not delayed. 110. Introduce new legislation requiring film distributors and producers to include accessibility features, including captions and audio description, particularly when these have been made available in other parts of the world. 111. Increase funding for sporting bodies to make their activities and facilities fully inclusive of disabled sportspeople.